Good afternoon, everybody. I am Chief Tom Hackney, Chief of Detectives from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Wanted to cover a couple things with you. One, the officer-involved shooting last night, but also the incidents which led up to the officer-involved shooting. At around 10 o'clock to about 10:10 last night, 19-year-old Austin Duensing of Jacksonville Beach and a 17-year-old female friend of his wanted to purchase some marijuana. They called some friends of the females to meet with them and purchase the drugs. They met three males at the base of the Shell station at Beach and San Pablo Road in Jacksonville. The males that they met are 23-year-old Randall Simoleon, 22-year-old Eric Tovey, and a 26-year-old unnamed male. When they arrived at the Shell station, Duensing and the female got into the car that was driven by this unnamed male and was occupied by the other two subjects. Once they got into the car to complete the transaction for the drugs, Tovey, who was one of the front seat passengers, produced a handgun and robbed Duensing of the money that he had brought to purchase the drugs. Well, Duensing produced his own gun. His own gun happened to be a pellet gun. The gun that Tovey produced was actually a real gun. He shot Duensing 3 times, once in the abdomen, once in the groin, and once in the buttocks. Tovey then jumped from the front seat into the back seat and commenced to beat Duensing to the point that he pushed Duensing out of the car, and the female also got out of the car there at the Shell station. The car fled with the other two occupants in the car. Tovey fled on foot, and the female was actually able to call the police, giving the police a description of not only the subjects but the car. Within 6 minutes of the sheriff's office actually receiving that call and dispatching that call to the officers on the street, Officer Clay Short, a 10-year veteran, saw a car that matched the description that was on Beach Boulevard. Officer Short called for backup and attempted to follow the car, waiting for backup to arrive. Officer Short obviously didn't want to stop the car without backup present. That car proceeded down and actually wound up at 12,250 Atlantic Boulevard at the Timberwood Trace Apartments. The car went to turn into the apartment complex. Officer Short did not want that vehicle to go into an occupied apartment complex, so he made the decision to stop the car without the backup there. As the car stopped, which it did once he turned his emergency equipment on, the rear passenger door opened, and at that point in time, Simoleon exited the car carrying a handgun. He pointed that handgun at Officer Short. Officer Short fired his issued handgun 3 times, did not strike Simoleon any of those times. Simoleon did not fire his weapon at Officer Short. One of the rounds that Officer Short fired went into the second floor of the apartment complex. There, went through an occupied apartment. There were no injuries reported in the apartment where that bullet went in. None of the shots, as I mentioned, struck Simoleon. Like I said, Simoleon fled on foot, and after a search of a nearby wooded area was conducted, Simoleon was actually found in a tree. The gun which Simoleon exited the car with was found along the path where he had fled and crawled into that tree. Duensing was transported from the initial scene where he was exited the car. He was transported to a local hospital with then life-threatening, but now has been upgraded to critical injuries. He remains in that condition at this hour. Simoleon was actually charged with aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer. There were no charges that were placed against the unnamed male or the 17-year-old female, at least at this time. An arrest warrant for Tovey for attempted murder and armed robbery has been issued. We do need some help in locating him. There'll be a photograph of him given to you in your packages. So if anybody has any information on Tovey's whereabouts, they can call the sheriff's office or they can call Crime Stoppers at 1-877-845-TIPS. They can remain anonymous, providing that information to us. The gun, again, that was used by Simoleon was located, and you can see it here on my left. The officer involved, because this was a shoot and miss case, those shoot and miss cases are handled on a case-by-case basis so far as it goes with administrative leave. Officer Short in this case was not placed on administrative leave. The investigation continues. Again, 2 separate investigations. Cold case will investigate the officer-involved shooting, and the regular homicide unit is investigating the attempted murder case. And I can answer a few questions if anybody has.
So the guy was caught up in the tree. He was he climbed the tree.
Literally climbed up into the tree.
How much further after the shooting, how much longer after the shooting was he found?
It took, we had dogs out there, we had got the bloodhounds. It took probably a good hour to find him where he was. Once we had the resources in place, that's where we found him.
Was he cooperative once he got the dogs under the tree?
Yes, he was.
Was it the dogs that found them? They traced them right to that tree?
It was a combination of the dogs being used and the officers on the scene.
Any other questions?
And the guy you're looking again for, that's Eric Tovey.
Eric Tovey, he has a attempted murder and armed robbery warrant, not a warrant. You should have his photograph here.
It'd be in the email.
Okay, it would be in the email, so anybody who has some information on him certainly would be helpful to give us a call with that information.
It seems like it took an hour to find him. Is there a reason why the investigation just kind of took so long, or why, we took so long to release stuff? It just, is there a reason why the investigation, it seems like you're still looking into stuff. Is there a reason why it's taking, or it took so long? Because he said he was found at what time, like about an hour?
Within an hour or so after that. So keep in mind that we had several investigations going there, had they investigated into the shooting of Duensing at Beach in San Pablo, the officer involved shooting. So again, the resources were used in both places, but I'm comfortable with an hour time frame. Once the officers got there, they established a perimeter. So obviously this subject involved in here is a dangerous person. He pointed a gun at a police officer. The same incident, fleeing from incident where somebody was shot 3 times. These officers are going to use due diligence and care, not rush into it. Setting a perimeter up and it taking an hour to find it is reasonable.
A lot of trees. There's a tree in the apartment complex or behind it? Or?
It was in a wooded area nearby the apartment complex.
Officer Short's first name or initial?
Clay.
Clay.
So is the driver not charged with anything?
At this point in time, no, he has not been charged with anything.
Okay.
He stopped immediately when the officer turned on his lights. We're still looking into the facts after the first shooting. Again, like I mentioned, it's still an ongoing investigation. Things may change, but as it stands now, neither he nor the female were charged.
So when the first shooting happened at the Shell, there was the driver, Tovey was in the front seat, and Somali was in the back seat?
Somali was in the front seat. No, Tovey was in the front seat when the shooting occurred, and Tovey jumped to the front seat, into the back seat, beat Duensing, and then he fled at the Shell station,
okay,
leaving the unnamed person and Tovey in the car.
Okay.
So the unnamed person is the driver?
Correct? Yes.
And the girlfriend, she was at the scene, she stayed
She was at the scene with Duensing, who had been shot.
Will she be charged?
At this point in time, we're still looking into it, but she has not been as of now.
And that's Duensing's girlfriend?
That's Duensing's, at least acquaintance. I'm not going to put them as boyfriend.
Could we ask Shannon to send all of these names spelled correctly?
Most definitely. Yes.
They're probably already in your email, Dan.
Because it ain't Jones and Smith.
Yes.
And to clarify, you said Tovey was actually the one who called police initially? Or the girlfriend? I know you had said Tovey at some point, but it was the girlfriend who
The
called?
girlfriend called police. As he was beaten in the back seat and pushed out of the car, she, the 17-year-old female, got out of the car, was able to summon the police at that point in time.
So that was the initial call that brought you guys
Yes.
out there?
Yes. I know this is confusing.
Any additional questions?
Did he realize he was being followed, or was it a high-speed, it wasn't a high-speed chase?
He had not even made an attempt to stop him. So
Okay, speed limit,
everything was
casual
speed
driving
limit.
along?
Officer Short, again, was using officer safety, waiting for a backup to arrive.
Right.
And again, what we do is a dangerous job. He made a decision at that point in time to not allow that car to go into a crowded apartment complex, make the stop there before backup arrived.
And the guy jumped out with the idea he's going to run anyway, after he stopped him.
I can't tell you what
Can't
he
tell
was
you.
thinking or what he wasn't thinking, but when he
Why
pointed that gun
not?
at the officer, that he made some decisions at that point.
Is this something we do we call it a police-involved shooting, even though
Sure, the officer discharged his firearm.
even though it didn't hit
Didn't hit
anybody?
anybody.
Any of,
That gun was the one that was pointed at police. Do we know if that was the one that shot?
Still looking
Duensing?
into it, but we believe it to be the same gun.
any other questions? All right, thank you.
Oh,
What?
you say we had a photo of Tovey? I'm sorry. Okay, so I don't need description.